Thank you for the cue, Gil.
Cool.
Yeah, so a bunch of the rest of our staff have it, and so some are in, some are not.
Hi, Troy. Hi, Charlie. My college roommate's joining us this evening. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Sarah.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Dave.
Good evening
Hey.
to you all.
So our record for Zoom webinars, hi, Moni, is 81. So hopefully we'll break that record tonight.
You still sick? Kevin,
No, I'm good.
you're good, huh? Good.
Lot going on,
Was it just like having a cold?
pretty much.
Yeah, cold, flu, cough.
For lack of a better term, we always call that the convention crud.
I got it, but I got over in about 4 or 5 days.
Yeah. And some of our staff went therapeutic, went fishing at Pyramid Lake, catching those giant Lahontan cutthroat.
Oh, what sounds like with the way of the stretch of the hands, 10-pound plus?
Well, I'm not going to name names, but Gray posted some pictures. Those had to be, I don't know, they look like 40-inch fish. I don't know how much they
Ooh.
weigh, but
40 inches big. That's 30-pound fish.
yeah. So,
Got a tiger muskie over in New Mexico, 39 inches. A friend, I was in the boat with him, weighed 35 pounds. And it was 1 inch short of being legal. Had to be 40 inches or you couldn't keep it.
Ed, were you at Blue Water or Komodo?
Blue water. I went to Komodo a couple of times, too little, too shallow, just never was good.
Hi, Carolyn.
Pete, I saw you there at Jim Fiedler's funeral, but I don't think you saw me there.
Oh, I did, but I had to run. That was a 2-funeral day. I hate to say it.
Oh man, that's not good.
No.
Thanks, ladies. I echo the same to you, Karen. So yeah, it sounds like we have, while we wait, we're waiting on a few key people here. But do you guys want to either shout out or type in the chat box where everyone's from to just demonstrate how national this webinar is?
I'm Ned Smith. I'm a native Arizona from Safford, Arizona,
Thanks
born
for
in
joining.
1940.
I can go next. I'm Emily HK. I'm originally from New Hampshire, but I'm over in Santa Barbara, California right now.
Thanks for coming out and learning about sheep, Emily.
I'm very excited to be here.
I'm Pete Similaro from McNairy, Arizona, born in 1951.
Youngster.
Yep.
Gil Mills from Sierra Vista, Arizona, current president of the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society.
What year were you born? Let's hear that.
1975, the year you were president,
Oh, a
sir.
kid.
Yes, sir. In comparison, yes, sir.
We've got a participant from Jersey. Welcome, Janie. Thanks for joining us this evening. We've got a few Du Bois people. Hi, Lainey. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
I see
I
Travis
guess
joining us
you
from
mean
Utah.
I was born in 42.
Hi, Dana.
You're muted.
screen. Up first tonight is a drama that St. Francis made during this era from RKO in 19.
If I could just ask, yeah, anyone's not talking to go on mute. There's some back noise. Okay, so we are at 6:01. We're waiting. We're waiting for Kathy Trainer.
Europe in Paris,
We'll just give it a couple more minutes.
glamorous, sophisticated crowd and capture the eye of a Spanish Barrio who's determined to seduce her. He's played by Ricardo. And this is a role Cortez had already played in a silent version of the story that.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Hurley. I work for the Wild Sheep Foundation headquarters in Bozeman, but I actually live in Southwest Idaho.
Wonderful.
Make it permanent.
As we wait for a few more participants, I'd just like to share that we have our calendar of events published. It's on our website for this year. You'll see that we're, I'll talk in more detail about this, but hosting a series of webinars each month. So stay tuned for that. And specifically next month, we have our annual members dinner for those who will be joining us in person. We'll also have a virtual component of that. So please join us for that, and you can hear all about what's happening with the National Bighorn Sheep Center and the Whiskey Mountain Herd. And since we have Arizona on the line and we're partnering, Gil, do you want to give a few words maybe about your banquet this year?
Yes, our banquet is actually March 12th. It's held here locally. We typically have about 650 individuals that show up at our meeting. At our annual fundraiser, we have everything from canvas tent raffles all the way to hunts. We auction off the Rocky sheep tag here in Arizona, which that money is used through the Arizona Game and Fish to be put back on the landscape specifically for sheep in Arizona. We typically raise several $100,000 that we put back into wild sheep here in Arizona. We still have some seats available. Last I heard, we have about 450 seats that are taken, so we have about 200 left. You can buy tickets online at adbss.org.
Wonderful.
Yeah, 'tis the season, chapter and affiliate convention time between now and June, counting Wyoming.
How come we don't have pictures to go with all the names here on the screen?
I think some people just want to be anonymous.
Oh,
Okay, so we are 4 minutes past the hour. I don't know if anyone's having trouble getting in, but I haven't seen any emails come through. But let us begin, and when we have our former board president join us, we can get to that part, I guess, post our discussion. So welcome, everybody. My name is Sarah Bridge. I'm the Executive Director of the National Bighorn Sheep Center. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm joined by my counterpart, Karen Sullivan, our Education Director. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Karen. And hi, Carolyn. No problem, Carolyn. We understand your eye issues. Feel better soon. Tonight is the first in a series of national webinars that we will host on a variety of wild sheep topics across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. We do this in partnership with the Wild Sheep Foundation, and specifically the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, as we do have an agreement with both organizations to function as their education and outreach arm. Please be on the lookout for future webinars. You can see that calendar of events that I referenced earlier that is available on our website. And if you guys are on Facebook, you can see these events on our Facebook page. We hope that you can help us spread the word, inviting your friends and family members to participate in these events. Today, we are very honored and grateful to partner with the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society. Gil and his team have been super supportive of the National Bighorn Sheep Center by providing us with hats and some of their swag that we featured in our gift shop. Thank you, Gil, and your team. Arizona, they have the original of the Scrivens ram in their possession. So with us, tonight I have a replica, and I see Lynn Stewart on the line this evening. Lynn was actually the first person to donate us, the first person in this whole project. Lynn Stewart, third generation Du Bois local. By virtue of his hard work, he came across the replica horns, gifted them to the Sheep Center. And by virtue of Kathy Trainer, our former president, who's not with us right now, we were able to get those horns mounted on this awesome head by Josh and Jenny Taylor out of Cody, Wyoming. And we are featuring we'll talk about this hopefully when Kathy joins us, but this will be featured in the National Bighorn Sheep Center with a plaque commemorating former Sheep Center presidents. So with that, I will pass it over to our Arizona partners. Tonight we have with us Pete, who is the former Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society president and former Wild Sheep Foundation president. He will be presenting on the information of the record history and genetics of the habitat in Arizona. We have Ned Smith with us, who's the founding member, thank you, Ned, of the Arizona chapter, and Gail Mills, who's the current president. So with that, I'll kick it over to our Arizona partners.
All right. I think we'd like to start off with Ned as a founding member of the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society. Ned, take it away.
Well, to give you a little background, I was the photographer for the Arizona Game and Fish Department in 1966. And I knew a gentleman by the name of Bob Stonehoff. I'd been out filming quite a few sheep. We had a TV show called Wildlife Views in the department. And Bob was a watcher of the show, and he said, "How would you like to come to a investigation meeting of sheep?" And John Russo, who was the first person to study sheep in Arizona, he was invited. Ben Avery, who's the Republic outdoor columnist. About 12 to 15 of us showed up for that first meeting. And, you know, we started and just kind of sit around and talk sheep. My favorite thing to do when I was in the department, when I had any spare time, was go out into sheep country and film them. I got acquainted with some real neat guys out there, Jack Walters, who's passed away, and Danny Naska, he's gone too. But they were living right in the Palomas Mountains, Blackwater Hills. They knew the sheep, and I'd go out and get with them, and we'd do a lot of filming. And so they were invited to the meeting as well. But the nucleus of about 12 to 15 of us in 1967 met in Jeff Seaver's auditorium. He is a taxidermist, and he was receptive to these men talking and coming in and using his facility. So that was where we started, 1967. That's 55 years ago. Started with 12 people, and it's grown now to 1,000 to 1,400, depending on who pays their dues and if they're on time. But we have a lot of life members, almost 500. So that's a little bit of background. I'm former president of the Sheep Society, 1975. I've taken 6 sheep over the years, 2 deserts, 2 Rockies, 1 stone, and 1 doll. And I took the Grand Slam in the 70s, so I was way back there with the Grand Slam. And they're all life-size mounted. So that's a little bit of history just starting off. Anybody want to ask any questions, we can go from there. I can continue if you'd like. John Russo, I'm sure you've read some of his books. He was a wildlife manager back in the 50s, and he got interested in sheep, and he started the first sheep hunt in Arizona with the Palomas Mountain Range. There was only about 3 or 4 permits. Nobody really knew what was going on. And one of the men, later a few more units were added. One of the men was Bob Stoneoff. He drew a permit, but he drew a permit in a really rough, tough area called the Gila Mountains, just east of Yuma. And he went out there. And if you're a deer hunter or just, going into the desert, and if you don't know anything about bighorn sheep, you don't know what a good ram is. And he didn't at the time. And he shot a small sheep, and it's a once in a lifetime thing. And he felt bad about it, after he saw some really big ones. So he thought, other hunters are up against this too, there's nobody really knows. So that's how the meeting came about. He wanted to bring together and form some type of an organization. He had no name for it, just interested people. They came from all walks of life. There were bankers, guides, you name it, plumbers, concrete people. I remember a lot of them. And they came together and we talked about it. And then we had a second meeting. About 30 some people showed up. And that's when the name of the society became the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society. And we started to ask for a logo and taking pictures. And I'd taken this picture of this big ram, and we just use it as a little model. I think it's still being kind of used. But let's see, I'll look at my notes here just for a second. Well, and it kind of progressed from the first clinic. We called it a clinic to educate hunters. After we got our name and got people interested, and it was slow at the first. And Bob got other people involved. There was John Housengay, who just turned, by the way, 94. He's still alive. He's one of the original chartered members. And there's only 3 of us, myself and John and Dick Fight, unless somebody else can tell me that somebody else is still alive. But I asked Dick Fight today, and he said, yeah, I think we're the last 3. And I thought I was the youngest, but Dick said, no, I'm a year younger than you, Ned. So that's where we're at with the original chartered members. Most everybody's gone to sheep heaven. They call it ram heaven, whatever you want to call it. And let's see here. Well, we just went from there and had a clinic, and we had silhouettes, we had pickup heads. We'd get people, the hunters that drew the tags, invite them to come, and boy, they wanted to come because they didn't know much about sheep either. A lot of them never even been out in the sheep country that drew permits. So they could look through a spotting scope at certain spots we had along trails out, and we did it in the desert. And we'd put these heads out there and silhouettes, and it gave them a good jump start to go on their hunt. And that really helped them, as far as that. It was a huge success. Later on, the banquets came. Now in 1975, when I was president, I had hardly a very small budget, a couple of $2,000 or $3,000. Now Gil, he's got about a $500,000 to $700,000 budget every year, and the wonderful thing about it is all that money, I asked Gil about it, all that money goes to sheep. You want to jump in there, Gil, and say something about that?
Well, that's just with our HBC money. So that's with our desert auction tag that we just sold in Reno for $300,000. Our Rocky tag will sell here next month at our fundraiser, and then also the super raffle. And that doesn't include the personal money that our organization raises that we put back into different plans. So that money we help direct through the state of Arizona for waterhole projects, translocations, collaring, disease monitoring. We do a lot of work. And so it takes a lot of money to keep sheep on the mountain. Ned, I do want to see if you could talk a little bit about the early projects and what it took to
Well, we didn't have any helicopters at the beginning,
no,
like today.
a lot of manual labor.
Yeah, probably some of the worst ones was where you had to pack cement on your backpack, and those are 90-pound packs. But some guides were used to packing elk, and they'd bring 100 pounds, 150, 200 pounds on their backpacks. But when you start getting into sheep country and you've got to walk in there a mile or so with those packs, and you've got to haul the water up there to mix the cement. A lot of projects were very difficult, but we only started out with 1 or 2 at the beginning. And now every year they do 5. Some of them are where they go back and redo some of them that they need maintenance. Maybe a crack's developed or whatever. But Game and Fish would scout out areas. So would the sheep people, the sheep guides, and they'd find different areas that I forget the term for that. Do you know, Gil, where the water would come in, or peat?
Tanaha?
Say it again.
Tanaha?
Yeah. Yeah, they would find these and they would look at them for development and send out Game and Fish. They'd go out and inspect them. And if it looked like a viable project, then we'd put it on the agenda. But we didn't do near what's being done today, back in the 70s, 60s. Well, we started in 67. So, today you're doing, how many do you think we've done since 1968?
I'm not current on that. I was just looking in the Borrego one, and a list of water developments in 1997 had 91 catchments that we've been by, and that was in the first 20 years. So I don't have a current list.
It's multiplied.
I think Gil, it's close to
You cut out, Charlie.
200 right now. 200 is last I heard. Yeah.
That's approximate, but I didn't know. I've heard that number before, but just going off the Borrego One book, there's 91 before 1987 that we helped with.
Man, that's awesome. Though, just think
Yes,
of
sir.
what our sheep have expanded in numbers to. It's unreal with the transplants and the waterhole developments. And we have to haul water a lot of times and fill these catchments in the summer if we don't have the rains. And that's a big job. Isn't that correct, Gil?
Yes, sir. We haul water. We help Arizona Game and Fish. In fact, this year we raised some money and donated several large water trailers to Region 4 and one to Region 5 so they can continue hauling water. Last year, before the late rains, we spent a lot of money and a lot of time hauling water. And when we do have to haul it to remote areas through Arizona Game and Fish with a 400-gallon Bambi bucket, it's very expensive with a helicopter.
Give us just a synopsis of how much you think you're spending on hauling water per year.
Well, that's through the tag funds, and that doesn't include what other department agencies or individuals haul. But let's just say several $100,000 of what we know about. That's just hauling water.
And those sheep would perish if this wasn't being done in some of those ranges.
A lot of them would, yeah. Sheep were here before us. They would find a way, a number of them, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As far as historical on, we just literally were mules to haul cement, water. We started off with, we had to have a concrete man with us in the early days, Gray, and he he came up with things that would keep the water in the catchments. And, it was a trial and error thing, we'd build them and we have to muck them, go back in later and muck them out if you had, heavy rains that brought boulders or sand down into them. And that's an ongoing thing still to this day, I'm sure, mucking out water holes.
It is. We still use sand traps and a lot of things, but we prefer a clean water source. So we prefer more of an apron. Some people don't appreciate the view of an apron of sorts, and we camouflage that depending on the agency where we put the water development. But when you catch clean water, you store clean water, you have a better result and less buildup and sediment, less maintenance.
Absolutely. And been to one catchment here last week here at Tonto Basin. Well, you can store a lot of water. You can store 10, 20, 30,000 gallons off of those aprons and have
Some
good
of them
walk-ins and fence them to where cattle can't get to them.
Yes, sir.
So,
Well, I think we need to move on to Pete. Is there any
Okay.
last few things you want to talk about, Ned? About the history
no,
of
I've covered the early days. Like I said, of about 12 of us, there's only 3 chartered members still alive. I don't know how long we'll be around, but I plan on going on a project this year.
Very good, Ned. Thank you very much. I appreciate all you've done and continue to do.
Thank you.
Mr. Similero,
Yes, sir.
you're up.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit first about another charter member, and that's Carl Scrivens. Carl and his brothers, Don and Floyd, they're basically from Southern California, enjoyed hunting, fishing, all the outdoor stuff. They grew up that way. And they became fascinated with hunting in Lower California, that's US side, and the Baja side in Northern Baja. And it was their interest that brought the Scrivens ram, one replica you have there, the one behind me here, to the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society. And I'll connect that in just a minute. But they had planned to go to Baja for years, actually more than a decade. And finally, just before World War II, before Carl was going to go into the Navy, they decided they ought to make a trip. And they planned a trip down there in 1942. And it was quite an adventure then. I mean, now, you can jet into a half a dozen cities down there. And at that time, there wasn't one road all the way down Baja. You traveled through washes and gullies and up and over mountains. And it was quite an expedition. And that's what they were looking for. And there's a place they enjoyed hunting south of Ensenada, that down in the San Pedro Matier mountain range, which is an enormous mountain range in Baja. It's on the spine of the mountain as you leave California and runs for about 70, 80 miles. And they really enjoyed that. And they got to a ranch that they worked with and basically were there to start their expedition. They were organizing the mules, packing the mules, getting everything ready. And Carl, walking around, happened to notice, sitting in the back of an old dilapidated wagon, a sheephead. And that sheephead turned out to be the ram that later would be a world record sheep. It's an amazing find, and it was actually killed by an Indian to make tacos. Down there, most everything that was shot, of course, was utilized for food. And the Indian who had shot it left the head laying right there. But it was picked up by a vaquero working for the ranch, and he brought it back to the ranch, and it was sitting in that wagon. It had been there for over a year, and Carl saw it, and he got his 2 brothers over there, and they looked at it and said, "My God, have you ever seen a thing that big?" And the simple fact was, no, none of them had. And so they talked to the vaquero. It was his. He had brought it back, and he had decided, no, I'm going to hold on to it. I haven't seen one that big either, and I'm just going to hold on to it. Well, they started off on their trek and hunted for about a week. And when they came back, that ram head was sitting in that same wagon just like it was. And it's an amazing story to me. Carl had been consumed by that the whole week. He wanted to get back to the ranch, so he, in some way, he could get that sheephead. And he talked to the vaquero again, and he noticed something. And he noticed that the vaquero kept looking at his wool sweater. And he had 8 pesos in his pocket. And for 8 pesos in a wool sweater, Carl Scrivens purchased the world record Desert Bighorn sheep. Brought it back here to the US. In 1946, it was officially measured at 205 1/8 and has been the world record for 77 years. And it's quite an amazing thing, quite frankly. Now, how does Carl hook up with his Sheep Society? Well, as I mentioned to start off, he was a charter member. They all 3 of the brothers had a fascination with things like what the Sheep Society was doing. And Ned mentioned that a lot of the early charter members were guides. And the sheep hunting world was small. It's small now, but it was really small back then. And they used to come over, participate in projects. They used to winter at times in Arizona, particularly after Charles moved to Wyoming, or Carl, excuse me, moved to Wyoming. And they became friends with quite a few Sheep Society members. And that's where this connection between Carl Scrivens, the world record sheep, and the Sheep Society came about. Very few people knew that Carl would carry that sheephead around in an old rucksack in the back of his truck when he was traipsing about the country. But that's just the way it was. And that friendship became very close to a few of us. We shared a lot of experiences, visited each other, hunted in Wyoming. They came down here, spent time with us, looking at sheep and doing other things. And it really became a more than friendship. It was like family. He said, I enjoyed coming down here and spending my winters about as much as anything. And so as Carl began to take on some years, he actually passed in 1999. He decided that he wanted to do something with the sheephead that would ensure its importance and viability. And he said, you know, I've talked to, at that point in time, Don had passed, Floyd was still alive. And he said, my family doesn't understand. They know what it is, but they have no attachment to it or what it represents. And he said, what I want to do is leave it to the Sheep Society, because he said, I know some of you will pass as well and move on, but he said, I believe in this, in what the society is doing. I believe that the society will always have an interest. And if you tell me that you will be the caretakers of this, I'm going to leave it to you when I pass. And that's exactly what he did. It became property of the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society in April of 1999. We're very grateful for that. We're grateful for the time we shared with Carl and what we, that he enjoyed what we did, and it was a mutual admiration. The original sheephead was mounted by his shirt-tail nephew. He was a nephew by marriage, Jim Gay, and was a shoulder mount that was in the Heads and Horns collection in Cody. We dedicated that in that head collection in 1992. We were up there to help do that with Carl. And then in 1999, we had the sheephead remounted on a life size. The Arizona Game and Fish Department provided a cape for us, and it was remounted, and we dedicated it at the Cody Museum in early in 2000. Subsequently, it resides here in Arizona at the Game and Fish Department in their main office here in Phoenix. And it's a beautiful life-size mount. You have a picture on your webinar, and we're very appreciative of it. And the Sheep Society will continue to own that as long as, well, I guess they accept what the charge that Carl gave us, which was to be the custodians of that. So I hope it's eternally, quite frankly. I hope the Sheep Society is around that long. And I hope that their interest in this is also around that long. So that's the story of how the sheep was found, wound up with us in Arizona, and it continues. And I can answer any questions you might have as well.
Yeah, Pete, this is Steve Kilpatrick, and maybe Lynn Stewart from here in Wyoming, and you could tell us how the replica ended up in Du Bois here. We'd like to hear the story behind that, Lynn.
Lynn, do you want to answer that or start it?
I have no idea how it got there.
No, Lynn Stewart, he lives here in Du Bois, and Lynn is on, I saw earlier. He could unmute himself. Maybe he could tell us.
Well, if he's not there, I can talk to several of the replicas. Originally, when this head, well, let me back up to the very start. On one of my trips to Afton to visit with Carl, we talked about, this is what he wanted to do, was like say we put the head, he's going to leave the head to the Sheep Society. I asked him if it would be possible to create some replicas that we could use as fundraisers, is what it was. Initially, we did 3 of them. And then later on, there was another 3 that were done. In fact, this one that's behind me right here, this is the very first one that was done. We gave this to Carl as a thank you for allowing us to do that. We auctioned those at fundraisers down here. Now, I'm not sure, since then, once somebody gets a replica, they're making a mold and making a replica of the replica. So I'm not sure how many are out there, but there were 6 original. Like I say, this is number 1 that we gave Carl. He gave it back to the Sheep Foundation while I was on the board, and in 1995 at our convention here in Phoenix, we auctioned it. And you might guess who bought it, because it's sitting here. But that is just, that, like I say, that means a lot to me because that was Carl's and the very first one to be pulled off that. Now, there were also 2 bronze horns that were cast from this mold. And those horns, the Sheep Society just put together on a bronze, it's a life-size bronze. I looked for a picture of it earlier and I unfortunately didn't get it out. But we have cast this, it's a one-of-a-kind that we're going to be selling. It's a fundraising item for the Sheep Society. It is a full life-size bronze head, the skull and horns, just like this, in bronze, if you can imagine that, at 115 pounds, that we're going to auction at, coming up here at some point in time. So that's the other one. That would actually make 7. But those are the only ones that I'm aware of at this time. And the one in Cody, I'm not sure which one that is and how it got there.
Well, I could pitch in I did unmute, so I could pitch in.
Go right ahead. Please do.
Thank you. Working off a cell phone, so I wasn't quite sure how to unmute, but we're in now. Anyway, the casts that I saw were owned by John Bickner over in Jackson, who was a friend of Carl's. And then I knew Jim Gay from also a friendship and a professional point of view. So when I was doing a lot of work for Cabela's stores, we were doing dioramas and mounts. There was an individual in Fort Collins named Dave Scheller, and Dave was making a lot of molds and casts, and he had world record antelope, which we mounted several of those. And I was talking to Dave one day, and Dave said, what about that the world record desert we were talking about? And I said, I know 2 people to contact, and you can touch base with them, and maybe you can acquire a mold or a cast of it, and then you can remold it, because he'd been doing that with several horns and antlers. And so Dave did contact one of them. I'm not sure which one, but he did get a set, and he molded them and then recast them. And then he, in appreciation, sent me the one cast, a cast that I did give to the Sheep Center. And at that time, he put an original skull in it, but not the full skull. So Sarah can probably enlighten you on how they did remove that skull, and then they were able to make a skull which was cast and then placed in it, and now it's at the Sheep Center.
That fills in the rest of the story.
So,
Is there any way we could get that story in writing between Pete and Lynn? I think it'd be neat to have a kind of a 1 to 2 pager of the history, and we could paraphrase that and maybe put it with the display here in Du Bois.
Sure.
Steve, this webinar is being recorded, so that should be pretty easy to put on paper.
Actually, there's several that have been written as well. We wrote one for SC's Eyes magazine when we rededicated it here in Phoenix. There's a complete story, and I could give you the edition and the year and the edition of that. And I have another one from the Sheep Foundation when I was president that also is in their records that they could provide for you. That was written. Carl and I put that together.
And
there were a lot of names and things happened there. It'd be nice to get it in writing. Thank you.
Sure.
And Pete and Steve and Lynn, Kevin here, just filling in another set of dots to connect this story. When the Wyoming chapter Wild Sheep started in 1982, I got involved in 83. One of our early treasurers for a long time was Kathy Gay, Jim's wife, from Riverton. And so at the time, it seemed like Kathy was spending time helping caretake for Carl in his latter years. I thought in Jackson, but Pete, you mentioned Star Valley. Maybe he was there at Afton, but that's just another link between Jim and Kathy Gay and the Wyoming chapter, and ultimately to the Sheep Center.
Kevin, let me add something to that. Kathy called me 3 years ago. She and I had known Jim and Kathy for a long time through the Scrivens family and everything. And she says, Pete, I've got these 2 horns. And these were the bronze horns that he cast at Central Wyoming College, had cast in, I think it was about 85, 86, right in there where you're talking, Kevin. He had those cast. And she says, they're in my closet and I don't know what to do with them. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, let me ponder that with some of the sheep guys, which we did. And that's how we came up with that bronze that I just mentioned. Those were the 2 horns that I got from Kathy Gay. We had them cast here in Prescott at Scourgia Foundry. Put that all together with, on a sheep skull cast as well. And it came out beautiful, but that's where those horns originated from. Mm-hmm. That's them.
One interesting little side story, if I could chip in again, is that when we had one of the early meetings of the Wyoming chapter, which was FNAWS in those days, we had at the Ram's Horn Bar here in Du Bois, Wyoming, and Carl brought those horns over, unbeknownst to anyone, but we were having a ram scoring contest, and as I do remember, it was either in a rucksack or some type of a bag, and he brought that over and put them out on a table, and we had the ram scoring. As I remember, Jim Collins guessed it right on the nose, but he recognized the head from other places where he'd seen it. But anyway, we had fun scoring that ram, and it was on a bar table over at the Ram's Horn.
That's just like Carl, and he had it in probably that old Army green, well, actually it was a Navy green rucksack. Is what he probably threw it out, because that's when I came up there to get it, to bring it down here to have it cast, and that's exactly what he gave it to me. We went out in the barn and got it off a shelf, and I put it in my truck. Any other questions about the Scrivens ram or the history?
Someone typed in a question. Their question is, it's from Lainey Hicks. What was the home range for the world record, the Scrivens ram? So
okay, the area that this ram was in, I mentioned early on, was the Sierra Pedro San Mateer, which is the largest mountain range in northern Baja. It extends from the California border down about 80 miles. And it's literally the backbone. I've been there, and it's amazing sheep country. You can stand on top of that and you can see the Gulf of California on one side and the Pacific Ocean on the other. But that whole spine is the center part of the sheep country in northern Baja.
Hey, Pete, is it asking too much to have you start the history of it, and then we could pass it on to Lynn and Kevin and let them make their additions, and then we can distribute it to everyone. When it's done, you can have it with your replica in the back, or whatever replica someone would want a documentary on. We could put that together.
Yeah, we could even start out at Game and Fish with the real thing.
Yeah, whatever.
Or wind up there. Maybe we should wind up there.
Yeah, well, you know the history, it seems like fairly well, the early history, and if you would start it, we'd greatly appreciate it for our replica here, and then we can get it to whoever else would want it.
I think that's very doable. One other thing I will add, I left out, and it's just part of the story, and since we're getting into a lot of the details, which is great, I think. Some of you will in the Wyoming area will remember when Boone and Crockett moved to Springfield, Missouri, when the Heads and Horn collection left up there. They pulled it out of the museum. Johnny Morris had made an offer to house it at his the new museum he was building in Springfield, which is unbelievable. But here's the kicker with that deal, and it was interesting. As I said, it happened overnight, and the trucks came in, they loaded everything in, and they took them back there, and they never said a word to anybody. And that includes the Sheep Society. And one of the things that Carl was very concerned about was that it stayed in the West. In Arizona, he said it's a great place for it. It's desert sheep country, but it's where you'll always have an interest in desert sheep. I want it somewhere in the West. And when that happened, that was an issue for some of us, a big issue, because they just literally loaded up however many semis it took and went to Springfield. Well, we loaded up a U-Haul and went to Springfield and brought it back. That was a decision of the board. It wasn't anything that was against what Boone and Crockett did, other than they did not consult, and it was not in the best interest of Carl Scriven's wishes. And so that's the reason it's back here in Arizona under the custody of the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society. But that did happen. And it made a brief vacation trip to Missouri.
Hey, Pete.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hey, it's Dustin Hofflinger.
Hello, Dustin. How are you?
Good. I think that bronze you were talking about is my screenshot, and I think if I switch over from video, you guys might be able to see it if you want to see that bronze.
Share it. You bet. Show them what it looks like. It's magnificent.
Let me see if this works.
Okay. Aha!
Can you see it?
It does. There's some ugly guy standing next to it, but other than that, it's beautiful. It is. It looks great, Dustin.
All right.
It. So when it goes up for sale, somebody ought to have it that's a sheep person.
Justin, could you please do that once more so we can get it on the recording?
Yeah, I think all I have to do is talk. Am I popping up? Can you see it?
Hold on one second. Let's see. Talk once more, please.
Hello, how's everyone doing?
Okay. Oh, wow, look at that. Got it now.
And you can just edit me out later like my wife does in our photographs.
Thanks, Dustin.
No problem.
Pete, Kevin here with a question. So you talked about this vaquero who picked it up during the Scrivens brothers hunt down there in the mid 40s. And no telling how long it had been laying there before he picked it up and put it in the wagon and had it there. I'm just wondering, maybe you and Charlie and some of the other Arizona folks, Ray Lee, a guy like him would certainly know, but talk a little bit about hunting, legal hunting for Desert Bighorn in northern Baja ended 30 years ago. And so there's been illegal activity, but no legal hunting. And so talk a little bit about maybe what happened between the mid 40s and the early 90s in northern Baja Norte.
Yeah, it's been quite a checkered past. When you look at it, there's been very little that you would call legal hunting in northern Baja. There was a brief time where I'll say it, a semi-legal, how's that? Best way I can say it, arrangement was made between a few key people in Mexico City and some of those people in Baja. And there was a gentleman by the name of Jorge Belloc. You remember Jorge? Was around a long time, but now this goes back into the 90s and 80s, 90s, that kind of thing. 2000, no, not 2000. It was probably the mid 90s at the latest, where they were bringing sheep out of Mexico and they were basically legal. Previous to that, there were no regulations. And the thing about Mexico is that the states really don't have wildlife programs. It's all under a federal program and an umbrella. And there's everything you can imagine as you go state to state. It's very different. Somewhere it's outfitter controlled, somewhere landowner controlled. It's a morass. Ours is pretty simple. When you come to a state agency and a federal agency and a few land management agencies, it's simple in comparison to Mexico. And now hunting in Mexico is very regulated, particularly sheep. Now the interesting thing is Northern Baja has never opened for legal sheep hunting. You cannot hunt there. It is something that, again, the state has pulled back each time, and a very powerful influence in that is the university in Mexicali. They have been adamant opposed to this, and many times programs have advanced just to get to that level and then get shot down by the politicians, generally the governor, that stops it from happening. And what we've seen, it's unfortunate because we don't have any management of sheep. Most of the sheep that are utilized down there are strictly to be eaten. I mean, that's by the locals that live in there with the sheep. But the people are not benefiting. And if you look at Southern Baja and Sonora and Chihuahua, there's a lot of money that has been raised through sheep management programs. It works like it should. And some people, Ray Lee you mentioned, and the Chi brothers from Baja and here in Arizona, and myself were involved back in the early 90s in putting all that together to make it happen because it had been completely shut down. So there are some very legitimate programs that are generating literally millions of dollars down there and benefiting the people as well as the wildlife. And then we still have Baja, which is a real question mark.
You bet. Of the 6 states in Mexico that had historic numbers of wild sheep, 5 of the 6 are back in the sheep business, and Baja Norte is not. And the ejidos, the local communities, they're really struggling because they cannot utilize the resource that lives out their back door, so to speak.
Absolutely. And the appreciation that comes with it. That's the other thing. Like I say, it's not just something to put in a taco. It's something that builds communities and supports families. And that's the important thing that's missing there right now. Good point, Kevin.
I have a question. I'm an artist, and Lynn Stewart, Mr. Schiller down in Fort Collins, he supplied me with one of his casts, and I'm kind of curious as to, he said it was a record cast, and I'm kind of curious about. I've used it in painting. So can you tell from that?
Well, I bet you Kevin might be able to tell, but that looks like a really big Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep.
Yeah, I think it is. Anyway, I was just curious if it was one of the ones you were talking about.
That, like I say, that looks like a Rocky from up in.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a Rocky Mountain. It's too heavy for a desert.
Magnificent sheep.
Yeah. Well, it was very interesting. I enjoyed the history. Thank you. I'm glad I joined in tonight.
Absolutely.
So Pete, let me go back and ask, between the mid 40s when the Scrivens brothers were down there and 92 when legal hunting stopped, are you guys aware of any, really whopper kind of 200-inch or better sheep that came in the 50s and 60s and 70s out of that northern Baja country?
Yes, I am. And that was through my friendship with Bob Householder. I used to go over to his house and meet with him. And I was fascinated by the sheep world. I just had an interest in all of that. And he'd get communication and pictures and stories and phone calls from guys. You'd recognize a lot of the names, Kevin. I mean, they're just the who's who of the sheep world. And then there were others that just wanted to hunt, but they were going to Baja. They were going in there and hunting. And I remember, this is just me talking, but I remember pictures of rams that exceeded 200 inches. There was one that was 202 and change. I can remember as the largest sheep that I had actually seen there. And then several books that were published in Mexico, and I may have one of those if I look in my library, that was given to me by a friend in Baja, that had sheep well up in the 90s and maybe a 200 sheep from Baja. Yeah, there were some.
What I find interesting in looking at what Arizona's done with their desert populations, what Nevada, I was just watching a film earlier this afternoon. Nevada's gone from fewer than 3,000 to maybe 12,000. They had a little step down this year, but everybody thinks about the golden days of sheep hunting, but look at what's happened in the last couple of years with that new world record ram off Wild Horse Island. Look at the hunter harvests off the Badlands in South Dakota. Nebraska this year, new state record at over 202. And so, the golden age of sheep hunting might be right about now.
It could be. Yep.
All right. Any more questions or comments for Pete on the Scrivens ram?
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I was going to cover just a couple brief things from ADPIS, from Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society. So this year, as every year, we need to focus on water developments with repairs, and we need to continue with our fundraising to support the department, as well as our own efforts with collaring, capture, translocation, water developments, and all this is done with voluntary work. It's an active involvement in the backbone of ADVIS. And so with that, I was referring back to my Borrego 1, and from one of our founding members that is no longer with us, Mr. Bill Hook. He put a couple things together in 1987 when this book was put together, and I was just going to put a couple things out there. To ensure that the future of sheep will happen, there are some things the members of this society must remember and work toward. The members of the society must always remember that the primary purpose of the society is the bighorn sheep of Arizona, not the members, not the society. Our only purpose is the bighorn sheep. Number 2, the society needs to recruit an influx of new members who are dedicated to sheep and willing to do the voluntary work necessary to maintain the society as an example for other conservation groups to follow. Number 3, the society must maintain its public trust by keeping the expenses of the society in line with its membership dues, so our contributors will continue to support the society. If we can do these 3 things, the people and the bighorn sheep of Arizona will be the benefactors of our efforts in the future. Hopefully, we will all live long enough to see this prediction come true. So he said it best in putting together my notes. Any questions for me, Ned, or Pete on our topics this evening?
None for me. I think you've done a great job. I think it's just going to keep rolling on.
Hey, Gil, this is Kevin. I'll ask a question because your guys' event is coming up on March 12, you said, in Scottsdale, but you
Yes,
guys
sir.
also have online bidding capabilities so that folks who aren't in the room or in the house, so to speak, can also help chip in?
We've done that in the past, and that's something I haven't addressed with our fundraiser chair. I talked on the phone a lot today with a number of people over a number of issues. I know we've done that in the past. Part of the issue we have, of course, is shipping our silent auctions. And so, it really cuts into our profits. And so some of our stuff should be online. Let me check and I can get back with you, Kevin. But some of the material items, if there's bidding online, shipping will be due also, because it cost us many thousands of dollars last year to ship stuff. So it really did not benefit us in a way we thought it was going to. So there is online bidding or you can call in, you can contact me. Reach out to Sarah. I can give you my email address. We can get you bidding if you want to bid, or you know somebody that would like to bid on the Rocky tag in Arizona, which is a very desirable tag, and it typically goes for between $200,000 to $240,000. And so my contact information is gilmills@hotmail.com. You can reach out to me and I can help set that up. Or if you have any questions on Arizona and our efforts here, we do have a lot of stuff on our website. It's adbss.org. You can come out and see some of our waterhole projects. We actually have one this weekend I'll be going to. I'll be going to all 4 this year. This first one is a very neat project. They all are. And each one's a little different. And so I look forward to anybody that can come out to one of our projects. If you come out to one of our projects, we do feed you a ribeye steak dinner on Saturday after working all day. Some of our projects are helicopter projects. We fly our volunteers up to the project. You work all day. We fly you down in a helicopter. Depending on the COVID restrictions with the department and with the new influx of COVID, hopefully last year that did affect us, and it included some more strenuous hikes. But if you come out, we've also now started including some dinner on Friday nights. So there's typically dinner Friday nights, some coffee and some donuts or something in the mornings. You're responsible for your own lunches. We feed you a big steak dinner Saturday night, have a big campfire. And then Sunday morning, if there's still work to be done, a few people go out. Some people help pack up camp. There are porta-johns on site, and you can reach out to us. That information will be provided to the public typically a week or 2 in advance. We provide that information sooner if you're a member of Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society. And we do put that out on social media as well. If you do come to one of our projects, we do invite you to our steak fry, which is later on in May this year. And you come out and free drinks, free ribeye steaks again. And Sam, our cook, Sam and Arnie, our 2 cooks, they do a really good job. We do like a corn chowder and jalapeno poppers. You don't go hungry on our projects. Not at all. Not at all. So
those are just great volunteer opportunities. I'm actually going to one this weekend in Nevada, the Guzzler Project. So yeah,
very nice.
Folks are encouraged to come out and put a little sweat on the ground for the benefit of the sheep.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to add on behalf of the National Bighorn Sheep Center, I'd like to thank Ned, Gil, and Pete for being our first guinea pigs for our first webinar. Sarah and her staff, Karen as part of her staff, will be putting on more of these. And if you have ideas and interesting topics, get them to Sarah. And she's trying to unite, the whole big sheep family across the nation and Canada as well, and Mexico. So this is our first effort to do that. The next time you see a notice, ship it out to your friends. I think we have the capability here to have several hundred on these webinars, and you'll see more of them announced in the near future. But we're open to any topics you suggest and recommend, dealing with management, research, fundraising, interesting things like Sarah and her crew just came up with tonight, this Desert Record Head behind it. So we'd love to continue uniting our family.
Thank you, Steve. Yep, I'll echo Steve on a huge thank you to our friends in Arizona. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Kathy Trainer is has joined us this evening with Eleanor Gibson, talking about how much of a sheep family we are. It is through Eleanor, who's good friends with Kathy, who wanted to do something special for Kathy Trainer in her honor. And so it's by virtue of friendship, Eleanor and Kathy, and our appreciation for Kathy, and of course the donation, the gift from Lynn Stewart, that we're able to have this in the Sheep Center. So more to come. I will invite you to our next webinar, which will be February 10th at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So follow us on Facebook, follow our emails for the Zoom information. And that will be, Kevin Hurley will be presenting. He'll be one of our speakers that evening. And that will be followed by our annual meeting on February 12th. So we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks all.
Have a good evening.
All right, thank you.